Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined by BadgerBlitz publisher John McNamara. Good to see you as always, buddy.
Right back at you, Matt.
Appreciated you hopping on with me and Bernie end of last week. That episode published on Monday. If you haven't checked it out, please do. We got into the nitty gritty of camp from Platteville last week, but as always, Badger news continues to roll on here in the preseason. So we are answering some questions from the Den today, and the first one of those we have is from Badger Guy in GB1. They want to know who we've got as a breakout player for this year. John, I'm gonna let you go first here. I got a couple names in mind, but I want to let you go first.
Well, I'll probably, this is kind of cherry picking, but Tawee Walker would be my pick. We talked about him last week. I think, like we talked about him with Bernie as well. He's looked very good in fall camp. He's going to get a ton of reps, assuming he's healthy. He can do a lot of things that I think Wisconsin wants to do in terms of running the football this year, but also, he's shown the ability to catch the ball in the backfield. He's kind of built like a fire hydrant. He's compact. He's tough. In Platteville, one of the days we were there, and Wisconsin put this up on their, social media stuff. He popped Ricardo Hallman's helmet off. I mean, he runs with a purpose. But at the same time, he's quicker or faster than you would probably anticipate just kind of looking at him. So he would be my pick for the breakout player this year. But that's, like I said, that's kind of cherry picking a little bit because he's kind of been the talk of fall camp so far.
I'll take Max Lofy, who looks like he's maybe in line to start at nickelback, which I don't think a lot of people saw coming, even, at the beginning of spring ball. I think he's been, a lot of people have been talking about him and his ability to play in the slot. And I think that, in a deep defensive backfield, he's a guy that, doesn't necessarily have all the notoriety, wasn't the biggest name recruit, but he has, it sounds like from, what you said, conversations I've had with other people, that he's someone who's been, really impressive over there.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. And he's been a guy that just has not been able to stay healthy. And, he was healthy in the spring and he's healthy now. And we got a chance to talk to him actually yesterday. And, it seems like he's been on the team for a while, and he has been, but he just hasn't played a ton because of health. And, now he is healthy. Now he is in the slot. And I think two big things there, Austin Brown was getting reps there, but he's played primarily safety in the fall. RJ Delancey was someone who we thought when Wisconsin landed him, you could pencil him in the slot, but he's been playing on the outside. And I think both of those things have a lot to do with Max Lofy and what he's been able to do in the fall. And he's absolutely a projected starter. And I think if he stays healthy, you feel pretty good about him taking the bulk of the reps at that position. So that's a big win for Wisconsin, because I don't think that when the season ended in 2023, you went and said, okay, we feel really good about Max Lofy, just because you hadn't seen him and he's been hurt. So that's, one of the really good stories, I think, so far of this 2024 season has been Max Lofy, a guy that's been with the program for a while, hasn't transferred out, has stuck with it, and now in his final season, looks to be in line to be a big-time contributor for Wisconsin.
I'm really curious to see how the two deep looks in the defensive backfield for that opening week game, especially if Lofy is the starter. Is it Owen Arnett behind him? Is it Austin Brown? Is it Delancey's on the outside? Like, I'm really curious about that nickelback position, especially, but just the two deep in general, because, we've talked about Xavier Lucas and how much he's turned heads. You've got second year guys like Jonas DeClona and Jace Arnold. And, I don't think you can still count out Amari Snowden with his frame and natural talent.
That's, Wisconsin is not, it's a good problem to have. And Wisconsin necessarily hasn't had that a whole lot, specifically at that cornerback position. When we got a chance to talk to Paul Haynes, he mentioned 6 guys he feels good about. And, you feel like Lofy, Ricardo Hallman, Nazir Forkering are that first group. Behind them, Jace Arnold and Jonas DeClona have both had very good camps, and Delancey's probably, making up that top 6. But like you mentioned, Amari Snowden has flashed at times during fall camp, and Xavier Lucas is a guy that's going to play this year. I was there yesterday, and he made a couple nice plays, specifically on a ball along the sidelines. That it was a really nice ball that Xavier Lucas just went up and made a play. So You're talking about, 6 that I think they feel very good about. 7 in Lucas. Snowden, is it this year that he plays? Is he still a year away? All good problems to have if you're Paul Haynes and Mike Tressel, the defensive coordinator there.
Yeah, it's crazy how deep the back. I guess it's back 8 now. It's a 3-3-5, so it's no longer a back 7. But that back 8 has a ton of depth everywhere. You feel pretty confident in the 2 deep and all of those places. So I think that's an interesting place where things are going to shake out. In terms of other potential breakout guys, I guess Joe Brunner. If I was to pick a guy on the offensive side of the ball that's not Tawee Walker, I don't know if you can call him a break. I mean, he's a first-year starter, but I think he has the potential to be a really, really good piece on the offensive line.
He's a guy that I think a lot of people have been wanting to see play. AJ Blazik mentioned that he's probably a guy who should have played last year a little bit. He's big, tough, nasty. He plays with that mean streak. I think you'll see that this year. He was a big-time recruit out of Whitefish Bay, and a guy that had a ton of offers, and his recruitment started off, it looked like he was headed to Notre Dame, and then Wisconsin was able to win out there. So he's a guy that I think a lot of people are excited to see play, largely because he was so highly touted, and the results or the early feedback on him has been very good so far.
All right, second question we've got from the Den today from the Giant Has Risen. What are the pros and cons of not being ranked in the preseason rankings? And is it possible to go from unranked to the playoffs with a good season? And so I guess I'm going to take this one here because especially with an expanded 12-team playoff, it is more likely than ever that you can go from unranked to the playoff. I mean, 2 years ago, we saw TCU get into a 4-team playoff when they started the season unranked. If you look at the way sort of things shook out last year, Missouri would have been in a 12-team playoff after starting the year unranked. Arizona would have been right in the mix in the same vein. So I think that it is definitely possible to make expanded playoff starting the season unranked, especially against the schedule that Wisconsin has.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it that they can they can absolutely get to anywhere they want to go because of that schedule. This isn't in a position where only 4 teams are getting in and your schedule's really light and you're looking for that key victory. I mean, you have Alabama, you have Oregon, you have a game against Iowa. That's a game that you traditionally play, but they'll be a good team. You play USC, you play Penn State. So there are opportunities littered across the board in terms of big time games and the ability for you to move up in the rankings if you perform well. I think it's fine that Wisconsin is not ranked, and a big chunk of that is because they haven't necessarily been very good for a good chunk of time. So this isn't a team of 6 or 7 years ago where they're just consistently a 10-win team and you anticipate them to be in that initial top 25. That's just not the case anymore. And it feels like a short amount of time, but Wisconsin hasn't been that type of program for the last, 4 or 5 years of that 10-win team that is kind of on the cusp of doing something special. So I think they have to go back and earn that if they want to be a team that you just assume will be in the top 25 to start each and every football season. Yeah,
it's been since 2019. Really, since they were that team. But I think we've seen in some tweets that when Wisconsin is not ranked in the preseason, they tend to do pretty well. I'm thinking about going back even to like a 2006 and Brett Bielema's first season, right? They were not expected to be anything. Would they finish like 11-1 that year or something like that? They had a crazy good season that year. A lot of times Wisconsin has been, I guess, underestimated. It's been a good thing, right? I think it's better to underpromise and overdeliver here than to be a preseason top 15, top 10 team and really have those big expectations, which haven't been fulfilled in the past 5 years.
Without a doubt. And if I don't get the sense that locker room, I mean, we haven't talked to them much about it. The poll came out on Monday. We saw them on Tuesday, which was yesterday. But if that is the case, and I don't think it is, I don't know that they read into that too much. I think they know where they've been the last handful of years. But if you're super fired up about that, look, you got Alabama week 3. If you come out of that and you're 3-0, you're going to be ranked. So, you can take some of that anger if it does exist, which again, I don't think it's going to be a big storyline within that locker room. but there's an opportunity right away to put yourself wherever you think that this team stacks up in the world of college football right away, week 3.
Do you think that these rankings will have any effect on recruiting?
Well, if you're in the recruiting department, you like to control the narrative. So if they are 3-0 and they're ranked 15th after they beat Alabama or whatever that may be, absolutely, that message will be communicated. If they're 2-1, they will communicate other things. They will find a way to promote what is good. Truthfully, I've talked to kids for 20 years now. They if you ask them, name the top 10 teams in the country for me, they give you the traditional ones, right? Georgia, Alabama, but I mean, they can't really recite the top 10 teams or who's in the top 25. That's more of a fan thing, I believe. That's more of you're an old guy type thing, looking at those rankings. So, high school kids, I don't know how much attention they pay to it, but if you're being recruited by Georgia, they will let you know that we have done these things and we are currently ranked where we are right now. So, the individual messaging, I think, is going to be individualized and based on where every team is. But overall, I don't think that 16, 17-year-old kids were, anxiously waiting on Monday to see that first AP poll drop. I think their minds are elsewhere.
Recruiting's about relationships more so than anything else. And I don't think that those relationships with guys like Max Steinecker and Pat Lambert really change, unless the team is going 3-9. Right. And I don't foresee a 3-9 season personally, but hey, you never know. It would be a shock to me if Wisconsin was under 500, even against this, pretty tough schedule that has 5 top 25 preseason teams on it. And, there will be teams that rise. There will be teams that fall. Who knows if Minnesota makes a run or if there's another team that, in the Big Ten that we don't expect to be great to pop up. But,
not to cut you off, man, I'm sorry, but, even Wisconsin's not shying away from this schedule, right? Their biggest recruiting weekend will be Alabama, and there will be other big opportunities because you expect there to be some night games there. So they're not saying, oh, geez, we don't want to bring a bunch of kids here and have us lose at home to Alabama. I mean, they are trying to get every big time kid on their recruiting board in the 2025 class, 2026. You'll see 2027s there. So they are trying to embrace that moment, embrace this schedule in terms of recruiting, in terms of environment, in terms of, showcasing what Camp Randall has to offer. So, they're not hiding from that moment. I think they're trying to embrace that. And look, if they beat Alabama early in the season with, 40 of their top recruits there, that bodes very, very well for recruiting moving forward.
Absolutely. So another question, John, that I have for you right now, we've seen a couple concerns, I guess you would say, with the team. And on the offensive side of the ball, for me, it's sort of two things that we've heard out of practice. Still having some drops from the wide receiver room and the lack of offensive line depth. What's your biggest concern at the moment, a couple weeks out from the first game?
Offensive line depth. And I don't know that it's close. We watched practice on Tuesday and Kevin Haywood was taking those 1 reps at right tackle. Now, if you go back to Sunday, Luke Fickell kind of downplayed the Riley Mahlman. I don't want to call it an injury because we don't know exactly what it is. You would assume it's something. We don't know what it is. Again, I don't want to speculate. I don't want to say anything that I'm not supposed to say. And I'm not hiding anything either. I don't know if Mahlman's going to be out for a day or beyond that. But right now, from what we saw on Tuesday, Kevin Haywood was taking all those 1 reps at right tackle. Now, he's a true freshman, but he does have that entire spring under his belt. So there were times, when I was watching him, he looked pretty good going up against the number 1 defense. And there were times where he looked like a freshman. So if you're a glass half full guy, you could say, Kevin Haywood getting all these reps is a great thing because he will play this year. And the more that he gets, the better. But if you're a glass half empty guy, Riley Mahlman's a really good football player and you're having to put a true freshman there. And that's just not a great situation, even though Kevin Haywood could be one of the best freshman offensive tackles in the country right now. I mean, that group thinks he can be special, but it's a lot to ask a kid to come in and start at tackle at this level of football. So on top of that, then, I mean, the depth is problematic. With Malman, you felt like he had a really good starting five. And then, Haywood is maybe that next tackle. Ben Schwal is maybe that next guard, but there's not a lot of established guys behind there. And look, if players go down, if Malman's out for a prolonged period of time, that's going to be a topic of conversation once the season starts.
18-year-old Kevin Haywood against Alabama in week 3 would be a scary sight. Now, obviously, like I've touted him as, one of the better offensive line prospects to come through Madison in a long time. And, the coaches have echoed that. His play at the All-American Bowl echoed that, right? He was one of the most dominant guys there, but he's still an 18-year-old who's going to be going up against, some of the best in the SEC pass rushers if he's out there at tackle. And that's concerning. That's really concerning. It's sort of the opposite problem opposite thing that we had with the depth on the back 8 on the defense. Like that offensive line depth to me is a little bit scary. The other thing I'm interested in is the wide receiver rotation here, because we've seen, we know Will Pauling is the guy in the slot, and we know Bryson Green is sort of the X, but it looks like a hodgepodge right now. I mean, it could be CJ Williams, who's we know has flashed some big moments, but has also been inconsistent. It could be a Vinny Anthony. Tyrell Henry has gotten some buzz. Obviously, Tretch in the slot as well, but I don't know how much they're going to line him up out wide. How do you see sort of the wide receiver rotation shaking out at this point in time?
Well, I agree a lot with what you said to start. Well, pretty much all of what you said. But, like you said, Will Pauling, he's a known commodity. He's your best receiver. And then I think Bryson Green has put together a very good fall camp. So, I mean, those two are, I would say, as close of a lock as you can be in that depth chart to run out with the ones. But like you talked about, that other third receiver spot, is it CJ Williams? Is it Vinny Anthony? Those two are the guys I would kind of keep my eye on. Tyrell Henry has flashed a bit. The staff is super high on Quincy Burrows, but he's been limited. So, who takes over that spot? Is it just a rotation? How deep do they go? Tretch will play, obviously, right? So, I mean, you probably feel really good about 6 or 7 receivers, but how those snaps are broken down and how they're allocated will certainly be interesting to see. But Will Pauling's a guy that I think you're going to put him on the field as much as you possibly can. Bryson Green's probably in that same camp. But everything beyond that, I think, is still relatively, not necessarily wide open, but look, you got plenty of time still with the back half of this month to, elevate up the depth chart or fall up the depth chart. And it's, once week 1 hits, it's not then, cemented in, right? I mean, you could see a rotation throughout the season based on who's performing well, who's healthy, a lot of different things. But Pauling and Green, I think, have elevated to a different level. And then beyond that, a lot of guys that they like, but I don't know exactly what that pecking order is going to look like.
One name that I'm surprised that we haven't heard a ton about is Joseph Griffin Jr., the transfer from Boston College. Big body out there as a potential X receiver, but in reading reports and talking to people, it's been radio silence on him. I haven't heard anything about how he's doing. I hear more about Chris Brooks than him, and Chris Brooks is a kid I've always really liked at receiver. But I'm a little bit surprised that he hasn't really taken off at all.
Yeah, someone they brought in, obviously in the summer, so he didn't take part in the spring. But I think you're exactly right, Matt. Just someone that you look back at my notes, or we have other guys there. Donnie's there. I would say anyone's notes. I don't know that you see Joseph Griffin in there at all, and I don't have the reason for it. It's not because he can't do this or he hasn't done this or whatever it might be. I think it's tough to come in at that point, though, and you miss all of spring and then you jump right into fall camp. Fall camp is a different animal than spring camp is. You are ramping up for the season, and you are, you don't have a lot of room for those, mistakes and, learning. Fall camp is, we got to get ready to go for week 1. So I don't know. He's a guy he brings stuff to the table that you like. Maybe it clicks later in the season, but you'd like to potentially see him stick around to see what he does next year. Once this room turns over just a touch, with some of these guys approaching their last year of eligibility.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think that there is depth there. I think that there is potential there, but it's a lot of inconsistency still. And also, I would imagine, getting on the same page with a new quarterback is not easy either. I mean, we saw that with Tanner Mordecai last year. I think that the Van Dyke to Pauling and the Van Dyke to Green connections, like you said, are there. But is there another guy that he trusts? I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a tight end. I really don't know if there's really going to be an impact tight end there, unless McGowan really takes some big steps forwards as a pass catcher, because I love Riley Nowakowski, I love him as a blocker, but he's not a natural pass catcher. He's not a natural tight end. I mean, he works his butt off, but he's physically limited as a pass catcher. And so is Tucker Ashcraft going to be able to take a step forward as a pass catcher as well? I think those are some questions that really need to be answered, because if Will Pauling is your only option in the middle of the field, that could be tough.
Yeah, and maybe Tretch could be that other guy. You see Pauling in the slot and then Tretch opposite in the other slot. I think that's a way that you get around that. I think this team's going to want to run the football too a lot. We talked about that last week. We talked about that with Bernie. I think they'll be able to. But like you talked about, Matt, I think you're finding ways to maybe get past the lack of production from that tight end room. Receiver, I hesitate to say deep, but I do think they're deep. I guess I'll cautiously say that. I would say with confidence that running back room is deep. And again, I know Darian Dupree and Dylan Jones have not played a snap of college football yet, but what they have looked like in the fall, they are ready to play. Now, is it certain packages? Is it like, here's a 10th of the playbook and we want you to know this 10th of it and be ready to go with that? But those guys are going to play. Jackson Akers going to play. I think he'll have certain things that, he'll shine in. We saw him a lot yesterday in some, goal line stuff. He's big and physical. He's 6'1" and almost 250 pounds. They're going to use him in certain situations. We talked about Walker a ton. If Malusi's healthy, he will play. I like Cade Yakimelli too. I mean, he's a guy that gives you a little bit of everything. So, I mean, that is a room where, okay, we don't have it in the tight end room. Let's try to use it in the running back room. Let's try to maybe find a way in the receiver room to kind of try to get past that issue. Because, like we said, Matt, I think that tight end room is a year away. Nowakowski's had catches in the fall. Ashcraft is probably the best blocker / receiver combo that you have, but they're not where Phil Longo likely wants them to be in terms of a legit threat in that offense every single down.
All right, last question, John. With Tommy Turbo Heiberger going down at least for part of the fall, which is tough. I'm not going to lie. Like that, he's someone who everyone has talked about since sort of day one he was on campus. I know Brady Collins just freaking loves that kid. Like he thinks he's a special player. His injury could hurt a little bit, but with that, we see Ernest Willard Jr. going to outside linebacker. I'm not going to lie, I did not see that coming at his size, especially. So that's going to be interesting. With that, how many true freshmen do you see getting snaps this season, whether it's on offense, defense, or special teams?
Good question. Let me touch on outside linebackers because I wrote about this yesterday. I think it's interesting. Willard, he was one of the highest rated defensive linemen Wisconsin has ever signed during the Rivals.com era. And I'm not making the decisions there. I think it's tough to move a guy like that to outside linebacker, knowing the need and the not necessarily difficulty recently to recruit defensive line, but you just don't get those type of guys. But then you watch them play, and I think this is kind of what the staff thought they had in TJ Bowlers, of a big outside linebacker, almost like, if you're a Packer fan, like a Rashawn Gary type, where they drafted Rashawn Gary, like, well, where are they going to put this guy? Oh, we like him at outside linebacker. We're like, oh, he's 260 pounds. Well, you see a little of that in Willard. I like the versatility there, though. You can put him on the edge. He looks fairly comfortable in a 2-point stance, but you could put him with his hand in the ground, so you give some versatility there of that big, strong, set the edge type of guy. Maybe in the mold of like a TJ Watt, but Willard is bigger than TJ Watt was during his time at Wisconsin. And then the other piece there is Sebastian Cheeks, who 4-star prospect coming out of high school, was a big time recruit for Wisconsin, ends up at North Carolina, comes back, pegs them to play at inside linebacker. That's a loaded room. Put him on the outside, and he flashed at times yesterday. Nice burst off the edge there. I think he's found a home there. And it sounds like Willer has too. You just wonder about a freshman, though. Like, he could go through the offseason program and weigh 290 pounds, and then your hands are kind of tied. He's just not going to stick at outside linebacker. But, he brings some versatility there, and I like both of those moves right now. I think Cheeks is, probably long-term. Willer, again, I think it depends on how his body develops, but maybe, Brady Collins gets him in the weight room. And look, let's try to get you to 260 pounds and really good. So that's, again, not a bad problem to have. But in terms of this year, looks like his home's going to be outside linebacker. And then to the true freshman question, look, Thomas Heiberger would have played had he been healthy. I don't know what the long-term prognosis is, if he's able to come back. Look, if he's healthy and it's middle of the season, I think they put the green light there and say you're gonna play. Anelu Lafayette is kind of in the same boat, but between the two of them, if they're both healthy, I'd give the advantage to Heiberger in terms of playing. Xavier Lucas is going to play. Darian Dupree is going to play. Kevin Haywood is going to play. Luke Fickell mentioned Emerson Mandel and Colin Coverly of guys that potentially could be in that two deep. Of those two, I would say Mandel more than likely to play ahead of Coverly. You've seen him taking a lot of those second team reps at right tackle. So, there are guys in this group, it could be 6 or 7. I don't know that it gets as high as 8, but there are no doubt guys like Dupree and Jones and Lucas I would put probably in that same boat. I hope I'm not missing anyone. I would have put Heiberger there, but again, he's not playing right now, and we don't know the extent of how long that's going to be.
Yeah, that feels about right to me. I'm a little bit surprised that Mandel's playing right tackle. I mean, he just screams guard to me. So it's not that I'm surprised that he's light enough on his feet to play tackle, because you look at his high school tape. He's road grader, like textbook for that. And so to see him at right tackle honestly surprised me a little bit.
And going back to high school, his tape screams guard to me all day long. And, that's kind of where I think Wisconsin envisioned him playing. But I think, you get him to fall camp, maybe the bigger need is tackle. You could certainly make an argument for that. And he's a little bit longer than I anticipated him being. But like you talked about, Matt, I remember that first day in Platteville, I had the roster and I was looking just to make sure that was Mandel, because to me, he was a guard all day long, but he has been playing tackle. That's obviously not set in stone, but if you're taking second team tackle reps right now, that's a good thing for those young guys. Especially a guy like Mandel, who in year 2, just like Haywood, are very much going to be in the conversation for a starting spot along the offensive line.
Absolutely. Well, John, you're always in my two deep. I should say you're always a starter here for me on Badger Blitz TV. We appreciate everyone tuning in here. Please keep dropping us questions and comments here on the videos on the YouTube page, on BadgerBlitz.com. Make sure that you are subscribing to Badger Blitz for the best intel and best info on the Wisconsin Badgers anywhere on the internet. So that's going to do it for us here today. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, we'll see you in the den.